Appreciate having you. Today we're going to talk about terrible people online and how to make sure they're real instead of bots and how to verify some of the information that comes your way. My name is Alex Harris. I report for the Miami Herald. Go ahead and everyone else can introduce themselves if you'd like.
I'm Doug Haddix. I'm the Executive Director of Investigative Reporters and Editors. We train journalists to be better watchdogs.
My name is Steve Myers. I'm the editor of The Lens. It's a nonprofit newsroom in New Orleans.
So today, as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies to keep yourself safe, some strategies to tell true from fake online. And for me, this kind of hits home a little more personally because in February, when the Parkland shooting happened, I was one of the reporters from the Herald who was tasked to go find witnesses and find survivors and try to talk to people about what happened. And I experienced a pretty negative backlash on Twitter. So I was reaching out to someone I saw post a couple tweets hiding under his desk. He was scared. He didn't know what was happening. I asked him if he was interested, if he was safe, and if he was interested in talking to me. As you guys might have seen already, and as more and more of these shootings come in, like especially today, the first people to reach out to some of these survivors kind of get piled on Twitter and on Facebook and all over the place. That's kind of what happened to me and many other reporters who reached out to these people, calling us vultures, leave the children alone, the kind of stuff that most reporters are used to when they have to do their reporting in a more public sphere, rather than just door knocking like it used to be. But what was unusual is that in the midst of all of this, people yelling at me on Twitter for trying to talk to these children in a scary place, in a scary situation, is that I was scrolling through my mentions, waiting to see if there was anyone who wanted to respond, who wanted to talk to me, who wanted to interview, who agreed to DM me, and I noticed that someone was tweeting a screenshot at me of one of my tweets, so I thought it was one of my tweets, and then I looked a little bit closer, and they had changed a sentence in the middle of it to go from, I hope you're okay, I hope you're safe, I'm sorry this happened to you, do you mind talking to me, to do you have photos and videos of dead bodies? When I first saw that, it was horrifying. I said, oh God, I did not tweet that. Obviously it's fake. Twitter will take care of it. I'm going to report it. Thought everything was fine. As the hours drew by, a couple more hours went by, more and more of that same tweet started appearing in my mentions again and again. People kept tweeting it at me, and I saw it spread elsewhere when people weren't even mentioning my name. And I kept hitting report, and a couple hours later, another one popped up that was way worse and set off a much bigger firestorm. Someone had done this again with another of my replies to a witness, and they changed a sentence in the middle to say, did you see the shooter, was he white? And when I went back and traced where that one came from, using some technology we're going to hear about from Steve today, I found it kind of originated from some white supremacist messaging boards, 4chan, parts of Reddit. It came from and it spread further and further and further there. And for a long time, I decided not to respond to it on Twitter because I figured it would take away from the narrative that we were there to talk about today, which was the horrible shooting and what happened to those kids. And, you know, as you guys saw, what happened in Parkland, we were trying to focus on that. I didn't want to draw any attention away. But after a while, the shooting happened around 9 or 10. My editors and I sat down and talked, and we said, okay, we have to do something. People are going crazy. We have to fact check it. So I ended up tweeting that it was fake to let people know. I thought that would stop everything. Not true. Lots of people responded and said, we don't believe you. We believe you tweeted those terrible things, deleted them, and then retweeted your own thing. And we believe it's real because we see your verification, we see the timestamp, and we see the retweets. It looks real. How can you convince me it isn't real? And that was really difficult, even when the Herald tweeted it, even when a couple outlets reached out to me and we all fact-checked it together from reputable organizations on the left and right. It took a while for that to calm down, and it was distressing, and it got in the way of my reporting because it was hard to use Twitter as a reporting tool like I use it when people were following me around and attacking me and jumping in the comments for when I was trying to talk to people and saying, don't talk to her. And most importantly, my mentions and my DMs were full of false leads. Some of the stuff we saw today, actually, with the shooting, was the same stuff I saw. People were saying the shooter is Sam Hyde, which is a known hoax on 4chan. People were showing fake photos of the shooter. People were showing fake names. There was all sorts of stuff piling in. And we're all smart reporters. We all know that if someone's in a car, if we see a car crash, we're reporting on the car crash, and someone messages us and says, oh, I saw the two cars hit, one of them was texting. That person probably doesn't have that much to lose by telling you this, so you're going to check it out, and you're going to think, okay, maybe this person has more credibility, So we'll check it out, we'll see what the police say, but we'll take that into advisement. But when you're in these national situations, people are going to target you as a local reporter for the situation you're covering with as much fake news as they can, because it is their MO to get it into the real news. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to fact check what you see, how to check photos, how to check people, how to make sure that you are not part of the disinformation. So let Steve take it away with an example of how easily it is to fake a tweet.
What's your Twitter handle, Alex?
Alex C.
What is it? Harris Alex C? Oh, hold on. Come on. I know you're there.
Saw you walk.
No, I
Walk away from the computer.
I know. I have to leave my phone on the podium. All right. Here we go. So what she's talking about, it's like it wasn't a complex Photoshop that what happened here, and so you can take any tweet, and basically when you use the internet, just here's like HTML primer, your computer goes to a server, it grabs the code, it copies to its own computer, and then you can mess with it on your computer, right? So this is pretty easy to do. Here, I'm not going to do it through Miami Herald, because if you guys take pictures, it's going to be terrible. Let's see here. All right, this is a good one. So this is actually from today. This is one of these fake images that came up, and this is of the shooter supposedly wearing a Hillary photo, okay? A Hillary hat. So it's easy enough to change this sort of thing in Chrome. You go to Inspect, and then this brings up, your little console here, and you can use this actually to, like, if you're coding, you can see what the, you can use this to kind of mess with things. And so here's the text actually, that you can mess with, and to say, this is so, and then it's easy enough. You do that. You close your little inspector window, and when she was saying like all this stuff is the same, right? The timestamp. There's no like Photoshop, because this is just all the code that's coming from your computer. So anyway, now I mean, hopefully we're not going to use this to prank everyone, but you can see how easy it is that to put out this sort of fake thing, and it's actually one of the. This is the first real big example I know in which someone faked a tweet and then it just got like really big, and so. Now that we know it's out there, we'll all be, sort of be ready for it. But anyway, Doug, you want to take it from here?
Oh, sure. That was faster than I thought.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do my big thing afterwards. If you want to do that.
I have to remember on a Mac how this works. All right, so there will be a link at the end of this where you can download. It's just a very short presentation, but it will have some links that you might find valuable, with some tools that hopefully will help you. We've decided to kind of split things up. I'm going to talk about checking out and trying to verify people, and Steve is going to talk more about verifying images and things like that. So we'll start with Twitter, everybody's favorite tool. Has anyone seen Bot Check Me yet? This is something that a couple grad students have put together, looking at automated kind of bot accounts have certain characteristics and they behave a certain way. They will just send out thousands of tweets a day, that kind of thing. So let me show you what this looks like. There are two facets of this. One of them is this website. So let's take a look at this. So you can just go to botcheck.me, and you can type in any Twitter handle, and it will say whether bot-like patterns have been found or not. So thankfully, I'm not a bot. It will also show you over the past 24 hours which hashtags are trending in the bot world, based on these automated kinds of accounts that send things out. You see the hashtag MAGA or MAGA, Make America Great Again. This was a week or so ago when I captured this. That is, at that point, was the most popular hashtag being used by bots that were just programmed to automatically send out and tweet things and retweet things and create what appears to be kind of like a grassroots rallying around something, when in fact it's all, you've read about the Russian troll farms and places like that. So this is a good tool to check out. If there's somebody that you find on Twitter and you're not sure what they're like, you can just run them through this. The other thing that is kind of cool is there is a Chrome extension for this, and you can just install this in your Chrome browser so that when you are on Twitter through Chrome, every tweet will have that little bot check me box next to it. And if you see something that looks suspicious, you can just click and it will run a search. So in this case, it found propaganda like bot patterns found in this particular Red Rising USA. You can then go kind of look and see, what that account has been doing. Sometimes it looks like a real person and you run it through bot check me. And in this case, this person appears to be legit. Other times it looks like a real person. MAGA Mel does not look like a person. Avatars are often a sign of bot conduct as well. But here, there's somewhere it looks like a real person, like this Miguel Fornia. It thinks he is a propaganda bot. So when you go to his account, to his Twitter page, and kind of check him out, there's a photo of a real person, lover of America, his wife, and so forth, cigars, singer-songwriter. He's based in beautiful Southern California. A lot of these look convincing. They look persuasive. But based on the number of times that this account is tweeting and what it's doing, this device has, this kind of extension has identified that as a likely bot. Now, it's not 100% sure or 100% safe, so I would not do a story and say this account is a bot. It gives you a signal. It gives you a clue, gives you some indicator to dig a little bit more deeply and don't necessarily think this is a real human being. There are a couple different tools that I like to try to background people on Twitter and on Facebook, and I'll show you a few of these. Has anyone used this site? It's called Follow Me, like follow me if you're from the Deep South. So what you can do with this, again, if you see somebody on Twitter and you're not sure who they are or what they've been doing, you can run their account through this free service. And it will pull up basically kind of an instant analysis of how that person has been behaving on Twitter, how long they've been on Twitter. If they joined yesterday and they've tweeted 2,000 times, they're probably a bot or some type of automated account. It will give you kind of a ratio of how many followers they have to people they're following. A lot of bots will follow 20,000 people and they have 20,000 followers. It's kind of a one-to-one automatically following each other. In this case, David Hogg, one of the survivors in Parkland, has hundreds of thousands of followers, but he's not following very many. We'll also give you a quick word cloud of recent tweets, kind of analyze what are they tweeting about, so you can get a feel for visually what they're doing. It will show you some hashtags that are have been used more frequently in recent tweets by that person, at mentions, accounts that they're interacting with or referencing in their tweets. So it gives you a way to kind of take a deep dive without just scrolling through their Twitter account. We'll also tell you how many times they tweet with links. So David, in this case, 41 of his 100 tweets had links. One of the other signs of a bot is if all of their tweets have links. They're set up to share information or misinformation and spread links to things. So Follow Me is also something you might want to just run yourself through it to see how you're coming across on Twitter. It can also give you a little bit of analysis of what you're doing. It will also tell you the time of day that the person is most active on Twitter. Bots tweet like all the time generally. Human beings, you'll see some downtime that they're sleeping. They're not on Twitter. Even teenagers still sleep. So all these things are just signals and clues to help you dissect somebody on Twitter. There is a service called Twitonomy. Does anyone use this? I'm always curious. This is a freemium service, so parts of it you can get some basic Twitter analysis of your own Twitter account once you connect your account to this service. It also has some premium features that might be useful. You can go through and take a look at everybody's followers or everybody that they're following, download that into a spreadsheet or a PDF. You can get all kinds of analytics about any public Twitter account. It's not that pricey, actually. So if you're doing one story or you have a bunch of people you want to run through this, you could do a 1 month trial, 1 month service for $20. And you could run as many as you wanted through, save the reports, save the spreadsheets, gather all of that one time, $20, and you're done. Or they do have some subscription services if it's something that you think you would use a lot. Let me show you what that looks like. This guy, bot or real, do you think? Yeah, I mean, he's got all the like telltale signs of, other than the photo, he looks pretty body just on first glance. Part of it, as you can see, he's tweeted, Truth MAGA is his handle on Twitter. He's tweeted 35,000 times, has 21,000 followers, or 21,000 people he's following, 25,000 followers, has liked 30,000 tweets. You know, those are huge numbers. Most normal human beings don't have that volume of activity on Twitter. This will pull some of the key accounts that account has been interacting with. It will pull the top hashtags. This shows over a 3-day period. This account tweeted 3,000 times. You can also download the people that this account was retweeting. You can download that as a spreadsheet or as a PDF and get much more robust analytics about somebody. So if you're really trying to background and go deep on somebody, for $20 for a month to be able to use this, I think it's a pretty good deal. And also, you know, like I've used it to pull our IRE account, you know, to take a look at who our biggest followers are, to get some analytics and what things are tracking and getting traction and what things are just kind of falling flat. So we'll talk a little bit about Facebook. Fake accounts are a big problem on Facebook. So the Washington Post did a really nice story a couple weeks ago looking at fake activity on Facebook. It was geared around Zuckerberg's testimony in Congress. In 2016, there were 18 million estimated fake accounts on Twitter. This year, the estimate is 87 million. Facebook has their solution they think is facial recognition software that will go through and scan and try to figure out who's real and who isn't. But right now, the big kind of gap in this is that if they're looking at my account, they're really only checking my friends and friends of friends to look for images and things that we might be sharing in common. It's not really looking at someone, you know, in Russia who might create a fake Doug Haddix account on Facebook. There are about 2 billion users on Facebook, and they estimate about 350 million images are uploaded every day. So that gives you the scope of the challenge that we as journalists have trying to make sense of what's happening, and even that Facebook has the challenge of trying to, you know, in real time figure out what's real and what's fake on Facebook. As Steve mentioned just this morning with the shootings in Texas, someone created this fake account for Dmitry Pegortsis, and photoshopped the hat that he was wearing and turned it into a Hillary campaign hat. So a lot of people were seeing that, and people, there's confirmation bias, right? So if you want to believe that a school shooter is like a Hillary liberal, and you see that, you might believe it and then start sharing it with like-minded friends of yours. To Steve's point also, it's so easy to fake not only images and tweets, but video as well, as he'll talk about later. So you have to be super careful with what you're finding out on social media. There are a couple, Facebook itself is not easy to search, not easy to search well. So there are a couple third-party apps that I like that do this, and these are free. One of them is called Stalk Scan, which is kind of a cool name, right? If you're a journalist, we stalk for good, not for evil, right? So let me show you what this looks like. This is Alessandro Ciaffoncini is a guy who lives in Columbus, Ohio, where I live. We're not Facebook friends. He redesigned our website when I worked at the Kiplinger program. So he's someone that I know, but we're not connected on Facebook in any way. I wanted to pick somebody that would be just a random example. So the way this tool works is you go in, once you find the person, you just go to the URL at the top and copy that. Everybody on Facebook has a unique identifier, unique URL. So you copy that, you paste it into Stalk Scan, and it loads in that person's profile. And this becomes really kind of a super deep browser search engine of that person's public posts on Facebook. So it's a way to really go deep on somebody's Facebook account without just trying to scroll through it. Some of it you can find just scrolling through their account. Other things are harder to find. Photos that the person's been tagged in, places the person has checked in, groups they belong to. But if you just scan this, you can get a sense, in about 1 minute, you kind of get a feel for who this guy is. And I think what you see about him is pretty accurate, but it's just a really deep dive search engine, really, for Facebook, for any public account. Sometimes just scanning the photos is a good way to get a sense of who they know in real life, not just who their so-called friends are on Facebook, maybe someone they haven't seen in 20 years, but who they are hanging out with, who they've been hanging out with recently. Pictures they've liked, posts they've liked, just all of those things you can search. The other cautionary note is everything we're doing on social media is searchable and trackable too, as journalists. So just be careful and be aware that all of this kind of stuff can be used to track your public conduct on social media too. He's traveled quite a bit, so you get a sense he's been in Berlin, he's been in Florida, he's been in California, all around the place. So it's amazing what people will share publicly. There's another one called Search is Back, and I would just encourage you to play around with that on your ample leisure time, right? Just play along with that and test it out. Some things will bring up different results. There's a third one called Graph Tips, and it works a little bit differently, but there are really good instructions on how to use it. I guess my parting advice is to always triangulate. Don't just rely on one platform. Don't do all your backgrounding on Facebook or all of your backgrounding on Twitter. Think about other social media channels to cross-check, regular checks in Google, other directories and things that you would check to background people. You're trying to get a full picture, so you want as much information as you can. So we always talk at IRE about triangulating and building that dossier with shoe leather reporting, talking to people, checking them out on social, looking in public records and other places. And there is the link to the presentation and my contact information. Turn it over back to Steve.
Before we move on to some of the nuts and bolts of like verifying images, do you all have any questions? We can pause for a couple.
So that last one, if someone was verified, that's not gonna show up, right?
Yeah, these are all things that people have posted publicly.
And back on the Twitter one, you showed the screen where they.
Sorry, we're recording this. We want to make sure we get the
Okay.
questions.
You showed the screen where they edited the text. At that point, someone took a screenshot. It's not like that tweet was all of a sudden different in your account, was it? It's just they took a screenshot and then deleted it because it didn't matter. They had the screenshot.
Exactly. So it didn't change anything on Twitter. You go back to Twitter, you see all of Alex's real posts. But the problem is that, you could argue that that was deleted. And screenshots, I mean, as we know, that they're often the only way to prove that something happened if someone deletes it. So it doesn't change anything on Twitter for real.
Some people did see the live link to the real tweet, and they saw that, and that convinced them that it was a fake. Other people, it's a screenshot. Screenshots don't lie. Oh, she's got.
This might be along what you're talking about right now. I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, but the inspect feature that you just showed, what does that do exactly?
So inspect is it's a developer tool, and it shows you the code that is making the page appear the way it does, right? So it controls you can control the HTML and the JavaScript and any of the other code that is making any website work. That's all the ways that you can that inspect allows you to use that. And so developers use that to try to debug something or to try to figure out what is causing something to happen. You right click on it, you inspect it, and it brings you to the part of the code that is making that thing happen so you can kind of tweak it. And in our case, all I'm doing is just changing the text of it so that it appears with different letters. And so I'm doing it on Chrome on a Mac. I've done it on a PC. I wasn't as good at it on a PC because I'm not as experienced on them, but it's the same thing. You inspect and then you drill down into that part of the code.
So what the words that you changed in the code, like this is a fake account,
right?
What does that do exactly? I mean,
It only changes it on your computer.
Oh,
so
I see.
I'm just trying to illustrate how someone could do this
Could do
in
that.
like less than a minute, and it doesn't require advanced photo. It doesn't require Photoshop at all. Obviously, it just requires a web browser.
Oh, and then they snap.
And then they would screenshot it and send it
okay.
out. Yeah,
I see.
exactly. Now I don't know. We've never really looked. I mean,
I've never found and talked to the person who did it.
Right,
But
exactly,
if I did, I have
but-
a lot of questions.
right, exactly. About
This
more
is
than that.
devious Steve's tactics.
Right. Any further questions?
Hi, I'm Christina Vega. I'm with Chalkbeat New York. I'm just wondering, similar to the Twitter bot check, is there something for Facebook because it's such a huge problem on Facebook?
Not that I'm aware of. Do you know of anything on Facebook?
No.
No.
Facebook's harder on everything, I would say.
There's one in the corner. Lori, thank you.
We should have all gathered around the campfire instead. It would have been easy to pass the mic.
Just two questions. Since bots on Twitter can be so subtle, is any idea of what share of traffic on Twitter is bots and how frequently you're liable to encounter one on any given day? And the other question I had is about the Chrome extension. Does that work with only the newest versions of Chrome, or does that extension work on most of the versions?
I'm not sure how far back it will go. I would just check out the website.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many. I don't know if anybody has a good handle on, because bots will come and go, and once they're detected, sometimes they change, and it's a constantly moving target.
But there has been some research that there is a substantial amount of fake traffic. I mean, you look at Doug's example at 3,000 tweets, and but to your question about how likely is it that you would encounter that, I mean, I guess it depends on who you follow and sort of what your network is like. I have a pretty high quality network of on Twitter, so I don't really encounter that. But if you're someone who you're trafficking like a lot of highly polarized websites, I mean they're sort of on the extremes there. So good. Okay, so now we're gonna do some. Hold on. We're gonna do some. I'm gonna show you how to sort of find images on social media during breaking news events and then how to verify them. And then, of course, for our purposes of this presentation, there are tools that you can use to try to figure out whether they're hoax accounts or real. So hold on just a second here. Oh, you must be in presentation mode. There. Okay. This, by the way, is that image, one of the ones of Alex's. See here, where she writes, "Was he white?" is what someone put in there, right? And then again, it has all these other images, so you can see. And then this one is about dead bodies. So that's the image we have there. Okay. The short link for the presentation here, it's bit.ly, capital EWA, image validation. Everything in this presentation is linked. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to go into deep detail because I want to get through things pretty quickly. But everything on there is linked, and there's plenty of resources. So I did want to talk a little bit about, not everything on Twitter and Facebook, particularly Twitter, is like malevolent, and so there, I think it's worth describing why people share fake images. And so one of the reasons people share things that are bullshit is that they're just kind of screwing around. So in this example is the first. This is my first example of a fake image that came from 2010, in which someone who was on Twitter talking to his friends. There's a tornado approaching New York City, and he went to the National Weather Service website, grabbed an image of the picture, tweeted it to his friends, and said, "Oh my God, we're all going to die." And then he just sort of goes on about his day. And then all these national websites picked up on it. This was like in the early days, so people didn't really have any rules, and all the things we're going to talk about here, people hadn't really thought about this. And so, reputable news outlets, jumped onto this. There was no reverse image search. Instagram wasn't around, so this was the early days. But it's a good insight into why people share those kinds of images. And then the other one, which we see a lot, I would say, we don't have great media literacy in this country. I think we've all learned that in the last year especially. So people share things because they don't know any better. So these are all images. This is the exact same image that was shared for multiple tornadoes in southern Indiana and Illinois. All these people are not trying to perpetrate hoaxes. One person posts it, and then other people share it because they just don't know any better. They don't know that this is that they should check something before they share it. So, and also we're trained to share on social media, and so people aren't encouraged to sort of pause. And so that is definitely one of the things that you should do, is you should slow down. And then I think this is so I've been doing this, I've been tracking fake images for, maybe off and on for 7 years or so. And most of the image used to be about weather events, and weather events are still really popular. But now we see a lot more fake images about politics, right? So we have a mass shooting, someone puts the hat with the Hillary on it. It happens very quickly. So I don't know how many of you remember this. Is this something you remember from the campaign? And it was, it's not, the falseness is really in the text, of course, and it's, the reason it spread is that it validates people's beliefs, and people who, it's a very believable quote, especially if you're an anti-Trump, and so you share this on your Facebook page during the election, and you can see why these things get so much traction. This is another example, and here's an interesting insight into why people do what they do. This was shared during the riots and the protests in Baltimore, and people said that it was a KFC in Baltimore. A simple reverse image search, which I'll show you how to do, it would show that this was actually of a KFC, and it was in Karachi, Pakistan. But one of the people who was tracking this, he talked to the woman who shared this, and he wanted to ask her about it, and so he writes that I'm writing about the fake images, and would you like to comment, right? So he's talking to this person who shared it. And she writes, "Which ones were false? It's not like it could have been portrayed worse than it was. Of all the things you could be right about Baltimore, it has to be the most useless, as if looting was made up." So I think you see sort of this different nature of truth for some people, which is that for this person, it doesn't matter to her that this is not a real image of looting. she knows that looting occurred, and for her, it's enough that she knows it happened, and this is of that sort of thing. That's enough. And there's been lots of research into how hard it is to change people's minds, and this is an example in which someone says that image you showed is fake, and she is not going to be convinced. I mean, it doesn't even matter. I mean, she is intractable on this point. And we see that especially with politics, it just takes one image to make an argument anymore. You remember this image with Kellyanne Conway? So obviously the message here is that these are all the presidents of the historically black colleges and universities and they're visiting President Trump in the White House, and it looks like Kellyanne Conway can't get off her phone. But when you this other image, which was shared a lot less, didn't go nearly as far. It shows that she's taking a picture, and it's quite possible that she was either in this other photo getting ready to take the picture, or maybe was tweeting or doing something else. And so that's an example in which the context really is important. And I also think it's important to know that not all of these hoax images are people who are trying to screw with journalists, or they're not all trying to perpetrate hoaxes. This image was posted to a Facebook page as Sandy was approaching the East Coast, and so all media was waiting for this hurricane to come, and everyone was sort of on guard. And this photo purported to show the soldiers at the tomb, the unknown soldier, guarding and doing their job in the storm. And so it was posted to this Army page. It was a Facebook page for the 1st Army Division East, and the argument here is that these soldiers are out here doing their duty for their country. And this isn't someone who is trying to. They're not trying to. I don't think they had ill will about this, but they did take a photo that was not from this event, because when all the national media picked up on this, and everyone was sort of they were sort of ready to be fooled, because all the national media was waiting for something to happen. And so this one image comes up, and it's an easy post that you can put up and say, oh my God, look what these soldiers are dealing with right now. This is the photo that so they actually had to go out and take a picture of the soldier right then to show here's what it looks like right now. And it's not nearly as dramatic. But this person, whoever shared it on the left, they were with a different Army division. There are ways to check this out. But the argument that they were making is that these soldiers are out here trying to do their job. And I think it's also worth pointing out that smart people make these mistakes. Clay Shirky tweeted this after the Ferguson protests, and he said that this is going on in Ferguson right now. And Stacey Kramer, another good journalist who lives in St. Louis, says that's from August, and she points out later that they're wearing short sleeves, and right now it's 17 degrees outside. So if you have a little bit of skepticism, you'll know that that's not real. I'm not going to get into this, but just so you have it, if you need a guide for your newsroom, ONA has a social news gathering guide already ready, and it talks about verifying the authenticity and being straightforward with your users about what you know. Okay, so I'm going to do some sort of big picture lessons from tracking these things for so long. In general, the example from today is one of the anomalies. In general, most first off, in disasters, it's important to treat social media as a police scanner. So normally it's fun to just talk about things and share things, and you're just sort of chatting with people on social media. But when in a breaking news situation or a disaster, it's important to sort of apply a huge amount of skepticism to everything you see. Because when you're a police reporter, you know that you don't report everything that comes off of the scanner. And over social media, there's a ton of stuff that comes across in breaking news. A lot of it's false. In fact, there was research that came out just last week that showed that if you're tweeting information during a breaking news event, if you like or retweet something, there's an extremely high probability that you're sharing fake information of some kind, that you're contributing to disinformation. The other thing that I've noticed is that traditional media actually has a pretty key role in spreading misinformation. So a lot of times people want to blame social media and say, well, anyone can post to social media and there's so much garbage out there. But in many, many examples I look at, it's not until they get into the mainstream media that they really, really blow up, right? And so there's this sort of weird tension where a lot of journalists want to blame social media, but they also are oftentimes to blame themselves for spreading this misinformation. And so to the point about the shooting today, most fake images are not photoshopped. I mean, I've looked at hundreds of examples over the years, and very few of them are photoshopped. And I think that's because it takes a lot more effort to go Photoshop something, right? The image that I showed at the beginning of this, where we have the shark. Let me go back here. This guy, you guys have seen this, right? It comes up in every hurricane. Supposedly a shark is swimming in the river. This one was actually tweeted by a journalist after in Harvey in Houston. It's the same image every time. And so, but in general, there are so few of those that in general, what happens is that images that are shared that are fake are almost always a real image of another thing. And that's why I'm going to show you how to use reverse image search to help that. This example on the right, this was an example in which after the Boston Marathon, people were trying to figure out who the bombers were, right? And this image was distributed, and they thought that this was one of the bombers. This is before they had identified them. And here you have someone who works for the New York Times. He's not a journalist, but he worked for the New York Times. And he's describing all these weird things in the photo that he thought was going on. But actually, it turned out to be a real image, and there are things that sort of happen to images when they're uploaded to social media. They get downgraded in quality, or sometimes they're copied, and so there are some confusing things in pictures that you can't necessarily identify. And I would recommend that you not try to sort of dive into Photoshop, because again, very few of them are photoshopped, and it's really hard to do that sort of thing right, to look at it right. And then to Alex's point, we see a lot in which journalists are trying to get an image, or they're trying to ask people what's going on, and they get attacked because the way that we used to do this sort of thing is we do it all by phone, right, or maybe by email later. Now we see these images on social media, and we ask people, "Are you okay? What's going on? Can I use your picture?" And we all get attacked. And every time you look at one of these breaking news photos, you see just a string of mentions with people who are attacking them. So it has become really difficult to do your job. That story, and the student that you identified, right? How long after you were one of the first people to him, right?
I think I was the second person to reply to one of his tweets. He tweeted about 15 minutes after the news originally broke, and within an hour he had like 10,000 retweets. And I would say there was more than 50 news outlets who'd asked to use the photo underneath it within like 20, 30 minutes. It was just, he got overwhelmed. He shut down his mentions, or he shut down his DMs, because too many journalists were bothering him and asking him questions. We later talked, we actually are still in touch, but we talked about that, and he said he was completely overwhelmed, and he just didn't know how to respond, and he shut down. Like, he couldn't answer anything.
Yeah. So how far after you were the second person, and how many minutes after he tweeted did you contact him?
Within 3 or 4.
And how did you find him?
I was just refreshing on Twitter with the location search.
Okay.
And with hashtags in Parkland.
Good. The other bit of advice that I've heard from these people who do it a lot, is to not rush it. So in this situation, things are really intense, but you come across this image, right? Your first instinct isn't to immediately retweet it. It's to try to vet this person, contact them. And if you have any doubts, to kind of put the brakes on it. I mean, it seems like an attorney if you have to wait for 20 minutes or so, but I've seen plenty of examples in which over the course of about 30 minutes, a lot of mysteries are cleared up. And if you are spending that time reporting, or maybe just waiting for more information, you can avoid a pretty embarrassing mistake. And then the other thing it's important to note is that of all the things that you can fake on social media, right? Like, so the name could be fake, the location, the geolocation is probably not going to be faked on a tweet. But, when you see the location of profile, that could be fake. The profile picture could be fake. But the thing that is not really able to be faked is the timestamp for when something was posted, right? I mean, whenever that was posted, that's when Twitter says it got onto their servers, and that's pretty accurate. Now, someone could change the timestamp in a Photoshop, but if you go to the original content, that should be the real thing. But I've seen cases in which you shouldn't read into that too much. For instance, in these two pictures, these are two pictures of an F-18 that crashed in Virginia Beach. And this picture was posted at like 1:05 p.m., and this was posted at 1:40 p.m. And I'm not going to go through the whole sequence of events about how you know that it's real or not, but the thing that's odd here is that the photo that was posted earlier is actually after the fire has already been extinguished. So this picture was probably taken not only from a different location, like in a different place in the apartment complex, but it was taken first. And if you're getting all these on your, trying to figure out which one is real or not, this would have been confusing. But if you remember that just because it was posted at that time doesn't mean that it was actually taken at that time. That's really important. Okay, so I'm going to go over some discovery tools. Advanced Twitter search is effective, and this link goes to a really great column by a New York Times journalist named Dan Victor, and the words that he uses to try to find people who are eyewitnesses, because a lot of times there's a lot of traffic and people are talking about something, but they're not actually there. And I'll give away the secret is that you look for the word me and my. Those are words that if you were next to something or you've observed something, you would have used those words. And so those are the kind of things that you should look for when you're trying to see whether someone's an eyewitness. So on TweetDeck, when you do a location search when you do a search for any words on TweetDeck, right? Any search column, you can pull down the drop-down menu at the top, and you can do a location search. So I was actually doing it today for the Santa Fe shooting. You can expand it to whatever area you want. And you can also you can turn off retweets, and you can look for tweets that have photos or videos. So you can use those to kind of narrow the scope. So ideally, you turn off retweets. You're not going to be looking for a lot of the garbage, but you can also not just turn off the retweets, but then you can look for posts that have been retweeted a lot. So you can look for something that's getting a lot of traction. Let's say you put your minimum on like 20 or 50 to see what kinds of posts are being passed around a lot, and that can help you zero in on what other people think is important. This link goes to a YouTube search where you can actually search YouTube by geotagging. Some videos are geotagged on YouTube, but they don't actually allow that search on the front end, so someone else built a system for that, and this is a little tutorial to show you how to do it. This is a Mac app called Photodesk, which allows you to do the same sort of searching on Instagram. And I'm not going to go into it here because if you work for a big company, you might have this service called Banjo or EchoSec, and essentially these are enterprise level tools that allow you to do sophisticated location searching. But for instance, with TweetDeck, you can do location searching there. So some of these tools are becoming cheaper. So these are pretty expensive, and they're really sophisticated. They'll send you an email alert or text alert to inform you that something's going on. They basically are useful if you're in the business and you need to know about something within the first 5 minutes. This is also an interesting tool if there's a breaking news event going on. This is a map of every Facebook Live in the country. So remember when the Philando de Castile is with the shooting outside of St. Paul, Minneapolis was Facebook Live. This is a way that you can try to find those sorts of streams. Okay, so a little bit of some tips on how to do this. As Alex pointed out, if you got to start quickly, because there are people who also, the pranksters start really quickly. I think it was today that photo of the hat was about 15 minutes. Someone said within 15 minutes, right? So which is pretty quick. And so there must have been like a headshot that was appropriate in the hat. I mean, the pieces must have fit together. Also on YouTube, you see this a lot where people will post the same video, newsworthy video, but they've got all these ads and all this junk on it, and so you're not really actually looking at anyone who has any connection to the event. It's important, again, to get to sources early. So start following them immediately, because they often they're just completely overwhelmed, and it's easy to see why. I mean, how many people are contacting that student in Parkland is a good example. And again, as far as timestamps, your goal is to try to go back as early in time, because you're trying to get as close to the event as you can, right? So even if you can't get close physically, you're trying to go back in as far as time. So the shooting today was at 7:30 in the morning of right after that. So when I looked on my location search, I was able, on my search column on TweetDeck, I looked for posts that were posted today after 7:30 a.m. So, you can do all these different filters to try to narrow in on it. And then take screenshots. use this link to get it down to download this tool to download videos, and you can also save web pages to the Internet Archive. You have a little browser plugin. You right-click on it, and it saves that page to the Internet Archive. That way, you don't have to like download all the HTML and all that garbage to your computer. So every time you think something might be worthwhile, you should go and get that. Okay. And then essentially what you're going to be doing here is that when you're trying to validate, you're not going to try to verify this information because you can't be 100% sure, but you're going to try to validate it. You're going to basically come up with evidence one way or another and decide, basically making a judgment call as to whether it's real. So I'll demo this if you guys need to. Have you raise your hand if you have not used a reverse image search or if you would like a tip on how to do it. 3, 4, okay, we'll do it. We got half the room. So what these do is that these reverse image search tools, they look for this collection of pixels on the internet, and it basically tells you whether that thing has appeared before. And because of what I told you earlier, most of the images that are garbage are of real things, they're just not of that instance. This will basically eliminate, I don't know, 98% of the garbage here. So we're going to do it. These are the tools, by the way. These are all links to browser extensions. Right here, I use the one called RevEye. I also use the site called TinEye, which is the one I'm going to demo here. And then this is an iPhone app called Reversey. And by the way, I was updating this for the presentation, and someone said on their rating, on their review, they said, I've just started doing online dating, and so now I'm using this reverse image search for people I don't know. And I just, the idea that you should be reverse image searching people you meet online. I mean, on the one hand, like, that's a pretty smart person. On the other hand,
have you heard of catfishing?
I mean, you want to. So anyway, so life's complicated, I guess. So here we're going to check to see if this image is from Rainstorm in Tampa in August 2015. Okay, let's see if we can do this. All right, so here's the image. I'm going to download it to my computer. I'm going to show you the hard way and the easy way. Here's the hard way. All right, so I got the image on my computer. I'm going to go to tineye.com. I'm going to upload the image. Okay, so now it's found some results, and this is the part that you're most interested in. It defaults to best match, but you actually want to go to oldest, and that one was, what did we say it was? August 2015. And so we have an instance in which it was used in June of 2012. So right off the bat, you know that this isn't from that storm, so you just walk away from it. And there are other, really easy ways to do it. For instance, you can go to any image, right? Let's say this one, and you can use your here's my reverse image search, right? So you right click on that. I'll do TinEye. I don't even know what this image is. It's from the Herald. So found no results, that were being used. So if you don't see any results for an image, it doesn't mean that it's real. It doesn't mean that it's of that thing. It just means that it hasn't been floating around the internet all the time. So that shark picture, you can see all the different times people have shared that shark picture. And again, this is like the most basic thing that you can do, like the first step for everything. I also think it's a good idea that, if you have a breaking news situation that you maybe do some posts about, let's say you have a hurricane approaching, that might be a good idea to tell your users how to do this sort of thing so that they can maybe not share as much garbage and get in the way of the work that we want to do. So this is one that I tested with reverse image search. I'll do it for you here. So this was posted in November of 2015. You can see all the retweets and the likes. Supposedly Germans who are taking to the streets in support of the Parisians after the Paris attacks. And I'll do my reverse image search here. These other tools, some of them are better in other parts of the world, but TinEye is the one I use because I'm familiar with it. And this was done November 2015. oldest. And so here it says that it found that image in 2015 in January. And it's apparently of a, I think it was like of a soccer match or something. And I think if you see an image online and it's a bunch of Europeans like taken to the streets, I think there's a pretty good chance it's about football, sorry. Okay, so the validation workflow, this is kind of like a key part of the process, is that you should interview the image about what it shows. So like here, you get one of these images, you're looking for street signs, you're looking for, signs that are in the crowd. I had an example before it was taken down of some people supposedly waving like a Muslim state flag, and it turned out to be like the Pakistan flag or something. So you're looking for clues in here to see what the image apparently shows you. And then the other thing that you're going to be doing very quickly is you're going to be looking for background on the source, and you're going to contact that person. So Alex, put you on the spot. What did you do? Did you look into the student's social profile?
Yeah, I scrolled back and I'd found that he was trying to be a comic artist, but he had talked about how excited he was for his first day of school, and his location was Parkland, and he posted around the same time that school started around in Parkland. So we took that and the pictures, which they were blurry and they weren't that great, so they didn't look like something we'd seen before, and we did reverse image one of them. Mm-hmm. And we didn't see it anywhere, and we thought, okay.
Right. That's actually a good point. These photos, sometimes like the real photos are often not incredible. They're not like the kind of thing that makes your heart stop and makes you think like this is like, the photo of that Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, right? It was just the photos this is of like kids on the floor with like chairs. It doesn't really look like anything, but if you're on lockdown, it could certainly, that might be what you would have. So, so you did enough on the social profile and feel like he really goes to this school. Mm-hmm. It looks like he goes to the school.
It looks like he went to a school. He looked like he was a freshman at a high school in Florida. He did not name check his school, but we felt confident with that. And then he responded to us on Twitter, and we had a little more information, got his family's phone number. But yeah, that was one of the first things we did, was scroll back on his profile to double check. Is this someone who created this profile yesterday? Is this someone who only ever tweets about politics? Where did this come from? And that was something that ran through our heads when we were looking for it.
Right. And so, by the way, when you're looking at hoaxes and trolls, do reverse image searching on the profile picture, right? Because a lot of these profile pictures are taken from some other place. They must have been if they're a troll. And so that's a good way that you can identify that person is not who they say they are. And then you're going to be looking for other kinds of corroborating information, other kinds of official sources, particularly, not just like that you see another news story, but then the news story actually says where they got the information. Because I've seen instances where one outlet sort of charges forward because they don't really know how they should check an image or to know whether it's real. And then someone else sees that as confirmation, and then they pull the trigger too. And so, but really, they don't actually have any corroborating information. They're just looking at one another for that corroboration. And you're also looking for apparently primary sources, right? So the social media posts that say me or my, and then other things that basically indicate some sort of eyewitness. These are all links that show you how to look through the photo data on the metadata on a picture. And so just a little background, when you upload a picture to social media, usually it strips out all this metadata. But what you can do, for instance, let's take your example, right? If you don't know whether that student was really there, you can ask that person, your source, when you contact them, can you send me the original? Just text me the picture. And then when they do that, you can open it up and you can open up in preview on a Mac, and you can see the geolocation data. It'll say what camera it was taken with, what iPhone model, the time and date that it was taken. Now, these things are able to be edited, but again, you're in a breaking news situation. Odds are the person is probably not going to be editing the metadata on a picture. But that's a useful way to try to, again, backstop something to see whether it is what they say it is. But if you try to do this on a picture just straight off Twitter, it's not going to have anything on it, right? Because Twitter and all the social media platforms strip all that stuff out for privacy reasons. And then we've also done, Marta's here in the crowd. We did some ground truthing for the Election Land project, and so it was we were looking for polling problems. And so what happened is that we asked people if they were experiencing any long lines, if they heard of any problems at their polling places. And the first thing we did when they contacted us is that we looked online to see where the polling place was, and then I got on Google Street View and I tried to see whether the picture that we're sending us looks like the place that is the polling place, right? So this is just like the first stop before I go on to call someone to ask about what the problem is, because I'm trying to see, whether there's some corroboration physically. And then I've had a lot of interesting examples of using the images before and after. So sometimes someone posts an image and it seems like it's about one thing, but then you get all the other images and you see that there's some other pictures that either the other pictures will show that what they're saying isn't actually what happened, or it will show you, it might show other information that shows maybe a street sign or something else that helps you, validate the image. Here, I'll show you an example here. This is from the protests in Chicago during the World Trade Organization about, maybe 6 years ago. This is of a cop that supposedly looks like, he looks like he's punching someone. And, it looks like an example of police brutality. But Brian Casella, the photographer here, he did a post in which he showed all the series of pictures. And what you see is that there's a situation here where there is incredibly violent, and you see this cop coming in from the background, right? So there's some sort of confrontation here, and this cop is going after someone. And then in another picture, you see that this cop is getting, a stick is getting broken over his head. So if you were just to see this image, it tells you one thing, but if you see all the other images together, it tells you a different story. And then you weigh the evidence. So I think we are out of time. If you want to stick around, I'll show you a crazy example of a fake video. I guess that's what we can do. Is there another session in the room? Can do it? All right, well, let's do just the this sort of very disturbing. So right now, it's there's sophisticated technology that allows you to fake videos. And so this is an example in which a New York Times reporter made it look like he was Jake Gyllenhaal. And this is actually, these are his facial expressions that are mapped to Jake Gyllenhaal's face. And it's a pretty scary thing because, we're entering this period of time where if you think people can be fooled by pictures like that Hillary Clinton, hat, imagine what's going to happen when we start seeing pictures like videos that are purporting to show, for instance, elected officials saying things that they didn't say.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. Stay woke, bitches.
There we have it. All right. And by the way, that he had to use his own voice on that, but there's software now that also it's becoming easier to edit audio in a way to mimic someone else's speech patterns. So that's between the video and the audio. We haven't seen like an instance in which we've had a massive hoax like that, but the technology is there. So we can answer other questions.
Yeah, any questions?
I have a really basic question. What's the best practices in terms of taking a photo off the internet if you can't reach the person to get permission, if they've just been arrested and you want to show a photo of them from their public Facebook page? So I'm talking about public Facebook. What are the best practices in terms of borrowing those images?
Well, it is not, it's not in public domain, right? So they own copyright. Even people who are arrested for crimes, they have copyright to their images. So it's pretty common for news outlets to use those photos without permission. And they usually do that basically hoping that if anyone comes after them, then they can argue fair use, or they'll just take down the picture and then they'll be done with it. So I would say most news outlets just basically gamble. You should always ask for permission. And if you can't get permission, there are ways. For instance, you can embed a tweet on a page, right? So that gives the person, for instance, if Alex had embedded that tweet on the Herald page, and then the student had deleted his tweet, then he still has some control over that. Then the embed would go away, right? So you can embed according to terms of service. That's a good option. And sometimes you can display an image in context. So like, for instance, let's say you use their Facebook page, right? You don't just use the profile picture, but you show a screenshot of the other things. And the reason for that is that when it comes to copyright violation, one of the things that you would be looking at is whether there is you're sort of violating the marketability or ownership of that image by publishing it yourself. And so by putting it in a screenshot, you're sort of putting some distance between the original picture and your own. So those are a couple options.
McClatchy, which is the corporation that owns the Herald, that's what we do. We take larger screenshots where you can kind of see more to the picture. Like the image someone chooses to share in a GoFundMe, you broaden it out so you can tell that it's from a GoFundMe. That's been considered fair practice for us, and we rely on the gamble that no one will ask us about it, and if they do, we call fair use.
Hi, Nicole Dobo from the Hacker Report. Alex, did Twitter ever respond to your cries for help?
Oh, that's right. No, they did not. I reported about 60 tweets, and after a little bit, they started coming back as this is not a violation of our terms of service. I reported them under harassment. They said it wasn't harassment, even though some of them came with language attached to the screenshot that was definite harassment. Eventually, we were able to get a hold of a real person who worked at Twitter, and they asked that they told me I should have submitted them under impersonation. So I did that with some of them, and then I got some replies back that it didn't violate those terms of services, and I asked them about that, and she goes, oh, turns out impersonation for us only means when you impersonate an entire Twitter account, not individual tweets. So if you're ever in that situation, Twitter has literally told me we are not the arbiters of truth. We are not out here to determine what's fake and what's real. That was considered censorship. So they never did anything about that. They never, the CEO reached out to me on Twitter and told me that he's really sorry for that happened. He's sorry that happened to me, and he asked that when his team came up with solutions, if they could run them by me. It has been however many months since February, and I haven't heard a peep. So don't rely on platforms to police fake news.
Does it feel hopeless to you then? I mean, like, I'm making this a question, not a comment. It's happened to us, like, not as bad as you.
Yeah.
And I've found no response from, Twitter or Facebook. It seems like they don't care about the problem, but if I'm wrong in that thought, and any of you have a different thought, you want to poke a hole in it just seems like they don't care.
I think they're terrified of angering people who think that they are censoring conservative thought. Because that's something I heard back whenever I tweeted about or whenever anyone wrote stories about the fact that Twitter was not responding to these questions of why isn't anyone responding to this, why isn't anyone getting rid of these obviously fake tweets that you have all the information to debunk. Just say that they have not, but just delete them. That's all I was asking for. And they said that can count as, some people could see that as censorship, and they're worried that they can't, to the resources they would need to be able to determine that, they said, would have to basically be people, not an algorithm, and they can't scale that up, is what they were telling me as well. So I think it's money, and it's the fear of, becoming a product that censors people. Something they're very nervous about that, and they get a lot of criticism for that. So I think that's something they're very touchy about. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I think you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you guys so much for giving us some time today. We're really glad we got to talk, and thanks to these guys who had some excellent tips. If you need their links again, come back up and we can repeat them. His is here. Mm-hmm. Yours, we could repeat it if we need it again. But again, thanks guys for your time.
Thank you. Take care.